Mike Anderson with the Reno Fly Shop here doing another tying demonstration. Today we have the Jigged Assassin, a really cool looking CDC nymph that does really well to imitate hatching insects and all of that. I typically use this pattern this time of year as we're heading into the summer. Spring is almost done. And there's just a lot of activity, a lot of bugs, a lot of hatching going on. And then a lot of the smaller fry are going to be in the water from the rainbow spawning. So there's just a lot of food around that can swim, that has a nice bait fish profile. And when this CDC comes back, it also has a nice bait fish profile. So we're going to tie this up in a 14 today. I use the Firehole 516 in a 14. And then we have a 3.3 millimeter slotted tungsten bead in black nickel. Alright. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to add 5 wraps of 015 lead. This obviously is going to give the fly a little bit of weight, but really what it's going to do, it's going to show me my proportions. One of the things that's very important about fly tying, and specifically this fly, is having your proportions right. So we're going to have roughly 2/3 of the body being a taper, and then roughly about 1/3 being the thorax. So we really want to make sure that we preserve that taper. As always, I'm using 14/0 thread for my smaller flies. Just helps you not build a big profile. I'm going to come all the way to the back. I'm going to put a little bump of thread right there. For the tail, we just use Coq de Leon. I want it to be roughly about the size of the shank there. And that little bump you'll see when I tie in my Coq de Leon will give the tail fibers a little bit of a lift off the back of the fly there. Come forward and cut that off. Alrighty, we're gonna add, a little bit of small black wired. So the main body of this is a turkey biot, which is not the strongest material. So having the wire here is going to give us just a little bit more strength and longevity, and it's also going to give us that taper that we desire. You can see also as I came backwards, because of that bump, it flared my Coq de Leon very, very nicely there. So the next thing is turkey biot in gray. Okay. Typically what I do, I'm going to separate 2 of the little feathers there. Again, just to give me a little bit more strength. And if you decide to tie this fly into a 12 or a 10, it's going to have a little bit more coverage. Alright, we're going to clip the ends even. And then tie it in. You can see all the materials that I'm stacking right now, I'm ending right there, right at the end of my lead. And that's going to give me a really nice taper. For when I come forward. Alright, so this is where it's super nice to have a rotary vise. We're just going to take touching turns, not overlapping, and no gap. Once we get up to the lead, we tie it off. And then my wire will counter rib, so the opposite direction that I brought those quills up, and that just locks it all into place, gives me that good segmentation. Alright, so the dubbing ball that I do is just a dark hare's ear. You can do something a little flashy too if you want to catch the fish's eye. I typically like to go a little more natural with this, especially as our water levels on the Truckee are starting to drop. I'm not saying that flies with hot spots and all of that won't work, but having something a little more natural to go with one of those flies is a good idea. So I still want a pretty long noodle because I'm going to make a pretty dense ball. And I'm basically, like I said earlier, going to cover those lead wraps that I created. So that kind of marks where my thorax is. And I want to leave a little space right next to the bead there. I don't want to crowd it because we have that CDC coming in. So just building a nice ball. Perfect. Alrighty. So the collar is CDC and Callibatus. You want to make sure to select a nice fluffy feather. Something that has a lot of long webby fibers. Typically what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab the tip, I'm going to peel back some of those, not ripping them off, but just pulling back and just exposing a little bit more of the quill there, cutting it off, and that's where I'm going to tie in from. Now the quill is super fragile, so you really want to take your time. I like to tie it in on both sides of the feather just to really make sure it's in there. Good set of hackle pliers. I'm going to palmer or stroke these fibers backwards. You can see what I'm doing, I'm kind of starting to train them to be on that side more. And we're going to do 2 full wraps. There's 1. There's 2. Okay, I'm going to do my first catch. I really want to be careful not to trap any of those fibers. So I'll kind of point the back of the quill away from me, kind of open up that little area there. 3 in front, a little tug, 3 behind. And then just kind of open it up just in case some of those fibers got trapped. Perfect. Little whip finish. There we go. So the CDC gives this fly a lot of pulsing. I'll use this as a wet fly sometimes if I'm on a shallower section of the river, maybe like a riffle bit. I've also used it on most of our still waters as like a Callibatus. Callibatus swim well, okay? And so having that little bit of movement from the CDC is a good idea. So we have this tying kit available online at renoflyshop.com. And tie this up, go fish it, have a good one.